Alright everyone, we're the Geek Philosophers. I'm Billy, and this is Yan over here.
Hello.
And we'd just like to, first and foremost, mention that if you're listening to this and you haven't seen the movie we're reviewing, which is the Cloverfield Paradox, it's going to be spoiler-filled, so I recommend you shut off this podcast right now, go watch it, and then come back and listen to us. Before we continue, just like to mention that we're actually going to revise how we've been doing our episodes. We've done 3 of them up to now, mostly focused on recapping. But since you've already seen the material, there's not much point to recap, so we're just going to give a little blurb, a little summary of the plot and everything like that, and then just get into the actual review, what we liked, didn't like, and other discussion points. So without further ado, Yana, did you want to get us going and just kind of summarize the plot?
Sure, in 30 seconds or less. Basically, the movie is, I don't really know the timeline of the movie, when it happens in regards to the other Cloverfield movies, but basically, it starts with, all we kind of know is that there's an energy crisis, fuel shortage, oil shortage. So this team is up in space on a station trying to particle acceleration, whatever that is, to
science something.
Yes, doing science to create new energy, and they end up cutting a hole through the time-space continuum, and weird stuff happens up in space, and they basically go into another dimension.
Yeah.
Pretty much come back to their own dimension after, and that's kind of the story, basically in a nutshell.
And to not really accomplish a lot.
No, pretty much.
They wind up causing chaos is what it comes down to.
Well, they did succeed at the end. Like, their thing was stable. Right?
It was, their thing was stable.
The beam was stable.
Yeah, so before we go any further, is it fair to say that what they did up there actually caused the monsters in Cloverfield, the first Cloverfield, to actually happen?
From the looks of it seems
kind of looked like they
yeah.
stirred the pot. So
yeah, which they kind of covered at the very start. Like, that was some really bad foreshadowing where they had that one little news clip up there, and that one author is just going like, "Oh, the Cloverfield Paradox, they could rip open the time-space continuum and unleash demons." And you're like, okay, well, that's obviously what's going to happen.
Why do we need to watch the rest? just fast forward and just see the monster at the end is what it comes down to?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so I guess we'll just go through a few things that we actually liked about this, because I don't know about you, but this was a bit of a miss for me, this flick. But we'll get into the detail. Maybe we'll change our minds by the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
But so what was something you actually appreciated with this?
Well, I loved the first Cloverfield movie, like the one in New York City with the that. I think it's still one of my favorite movies. It's in my top 10 or so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just love that movie. So seeing that they made a couple of years ago, they did that 10th Cloverfield Lane movie, which I thought was going to tie into it. But
before you get to that one, the cool thing about the initial Cloverfield was it was right on the heels of like the Blair Witch, the found footage. It was still when found footage was cool.
Exactly.
In the same realm of paranormal activity.
Even without that kind of shooting style, though, like just the theme of the movie, if you will, like, just the monster loose in New York, and we don't really know its origins or what happened.
Are you typically a fan of the big monster movies?
I'm pretty easily amused. So,
yeah. Okay. I mean, big monsters, little monsters.
Any kind of monsters, it's all good. But yeah, so I love that movie, and then here, when I saw this, I'm like, hey, I need to watch this movie because I love the Cloverfield, or just Cloverfield.
Mm-hmm.
The tie-ins were kind of loose.
You're talking about the second Cloverfield, so
yeah,
Cloverfield Lane, right?
Well, that one I didn't even think had any tie-ins to this.
Except for the name of the
they had Cloverfield in the name.
Yeah.
This one actually tied in a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
They had the same kind of monsters in it.
Yeah, because it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the end of 10 Cloverfield Lane, it was like aliens.
Yeah, they had like spaceships, and they were flying around with weird tentacles and stuff.
Yeah.
So and I actually looked this up on Netflix.
Yeah.
It actually says in the description of 10 Cloverfield Lane, it says, not necessarily a sequel to the 2008 hit.
Oh, yeah?
Except for the name, yeah.
Oh.
So it actually mentions it in there, but it's made... Anyway, so that's 10 Cloverfield Lane. We're not talking about that one.
Well, good to mention, though, because that's the one thing that I'd kind of seen and heard is the fact that they just... It seemed like a bit of a rip-off or a cop-out where they had these two okay movies that they seem to tie in really thinly just to kind of borrow the fame from the initial Cloverfield,
Get
right?
the fanboys like me to be like, oh my god, another
Yes,
Cloverfield movie.
that's exactly it. So I guess we already started talking about some negatives, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But something that I can kind of give props to is the fact that the effects are pretty good. I found the effects were polished, and I've mentioned this before, where Netflix really seems to be upping its game. And I always refer to Black Mirror because that's one that it's always those really neat kind of the thin monitors and the really neat devices and the effects for dystopian type things, right? And I just find space in general, if you're not shooting for the moon, see what I did there? But if you're not going for like gold. Say the movie Gravity or The Martian, like spending the big movie bucks on it as opposed to, I guess Netflix has the bucks now.
Yeah, now
they have $11 from me every month. But just one of those things where space is one of those things I rank it up there with, say, fantasy, where if you do it right, it's really good.
It's really good, yeah.
If you don't do it right, or even just fall slightly short, it's just may as well just rate it a 0 type of thing. And these guys actually did space okay.
Yeah.
So that part I can kind of give props to. Yeah. Another thing too, and I always find it surprising when you have a good, and there's not a whole lot of well-known actors in this, but
there's 2 of them that I know, that I recognize anyways.
Oh yeah?
Chris O'Dowd, the Irish guy. Which I thought was a kind of a weird role for him at first, because he's usually very big into the comedies. Like, he's always a comedic actor. So seeing him in what seemed to be a horror space sci-fi movie, I thought that was a weird choice. But then it turns out that his character had a lot of comedic attributes to it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna butcher her name, but Zhang Ji.
Yeah.
Ji?
Yeah.
She was in what was that? Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Oh, was that her?
House of Flying Daggers, yeah.
So, and that's the thing, is that I always find with these movies that I guess they attempt to make them really good. An example is that one I was just telling you about. I was watching The Seventh Son. There's a whole smash of good good actors in there, but the movie is just not good. And it's just one of those things where you wonder, you guys need to switch agents. Yeah. I'm not sure how this works exactly, but you guys need to find someone else. So the thing is, this, even though the premise is a little silly, is a lot silly, and everything like that, it's just one of those things where the acting in this flick is pretty good. So that's a good part about it, I guess. And for the most part, it's entertaining. It was definitely a movie where, even though I was rolling my eyes sometimes, it wasn't a chore to watch this.
No, exactly. And one thing I found that they did well that I haven't seen in a lot of these kind of space movies is when they actually fired up their reactor thing, whatever that was, and they actually jumped into that other dimension. The way the 2 dimensions kind of clash together, you actually see a few different occurrences of how they did that. Like the one where the girl ends up in the wall of their spaceship. I guess that was just, she was in that spot, and then the new spaceship popped up there, and then she had wires through her and whatnot, right? So that was one.
Is that your theory?
That's my theory. And then the Russian dude that has his 2 personalities merged into one body.
There was a lot that happened to that guy.
What was that movie with Jim Carrey there? Burt Wonderstone, I think, where he drills his head and his eyeball goes. That I started laughing in this scene when his eyeball, the Russian dude's eyeball, just moves to the side, because that's immediately what I thought of.
Yeah.
But then like his eyeballs are working into, like, he's like a chameleon, because I think he's got 2 versions of himself in that one body. That's how I understood it, anyways. Because at one point he's talking and the other eyeball's kind of moving and he's talking to himself.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of like a neat way to kind of clash the 2 dimensions together, how they kind of just merge. I don't know how the worms got inside of him. That was a mystery to me. And
that's what it seemed like. Is so you picture that, just that one character, a few interesting ideas with him, but that's what I found a lot of this movie was just a lot of neat ideas kind of just jammed together in a big ball. And that includes the other alternate dimension, tossing Cloverfield in there, the actual Cloverfield monsters. I just found there was lots just jammed in a big wad, and they called it a movie, right? So I guess now that I mentioned Cloverfield, let's get back to that, because it's such a big part of this, is the fact that, you mentioned you're not sure how this falls into the timeline, but we see at the start where things are okay on Earth, right? And then you see where the one guy that's actually, he's on Earth and he's broadcasting back to them, right?
Yeah.
And you just see it kind of slowly. Well, I think you only tune into him about 3 times throughout the movie, but you just every time you see it's more chaotic, more chaotic.
Yeah.
And then of course the ending where the ship's coming down back into the atmosphere and the big monster snaps him up. So you'd have to think that the first Cloverfield, the initial one, happens, and the start of it is pretty much the end of this movie, because the poop happens, monsters, and that's when stuff starts happening. So it's kind of the start of, remember at the thing drops into the ocean?
Yeah, but now that was my thought initially too, is when their escape pod is going back to Earth and he's telling like her husband saying, send it back.
Yeah.
My original thought too is that their escape pod hitting the ocean or landing back, because they actually said it's landing up the coast of Delaware.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where
the big carnival.
Nick,
Canaveral?
I think his name was Nick. But when they're on the Ferris wheel, that was a year before the Cloverfield movie.
Okay.
Because he's like the first Cloverfield movie, all the recordings when they're recording the monster, they're recording over top scenes or the videotape that he was with his girlfriend, because they broke up at that point, So that was way in the past. So that was my thought too. I was like, oh, okay, they're the escape pod. They're what hits the ocean.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, no, there's already monsters everywhere and there's chaos. So that doesn't make sense. It ties in, but not cleanly.
Okay,
like
so where do you think 10 Cloverfield Lane fits in this timeline?
I don't think it does. I have no idea where.
Maybe it's a street. It just happens to be a street they called in the alternate dimension.
Maybe.
Just because it was a cool movie.
You know what I thought it was going to tie in as? Because 10 Cloverfield Lane is all about John Goodman, I was going to say John Candy.
Yeah.
John Goodman locked in a bunker with a girl, right?
Yeah.
And it was his daughter, I think.
No. She was just some rando.
Well, the one in the movie, but the first girl that was there, remember, that's not there anymore?
Oh,
I think was his daughter.
Okay, I got you.
But when Hamilton's husband finds that girl in the wrecked hospital, and then he sends somebody, hey, can I use your bunker or your shelter? And he says, yeah, sure. And then they kind of go into the bunker where they're staying. I was like, oh, is this the tie-in to 10 Cloverfield Lane? But then I thought, okay, well, it doesn't make sense.
because he was calling from a bunker, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that might have
just
been
that was where I thought, oh, is this the tie-in to 10 Cloverfield Lane? But then it didn't make any sense either. So.
Yeah. And that's the, well, I wouldn't say it's the problem, but it's just one of those things where I know that and I got to mention this to everyone that's listening, Yan, like he mentioned, big fan of Cloverfield. I know when we were watching the Super Bowl, and that's worth mentioning too. I know we were watching Super Bowl, and there's a commercial, Netflix and the new Cloverfield movie, and you're like, oh my god, like
fangirl moment.
Forget Tom Brady, forget the exciting game and everything like that. It turned out to be, oh my god, I gotta throw that on my Netflix list right away. And that's the unfortunate thing, is there are probably a lot of people like you that were actually, I'm gonna say it, disappointed. I'm sure you were kind of disappointed by this movie, being space and all.
Yes and no.
Really?
I actually enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
Like, there was enough kind of weirdness to it to kind of keep me interested.
Yeah.
I want to say I'm disappointed that it didn't tie in better, but knowing kind of the director, or I think he's the director, the writer, producer, J.J. Abrams, who did Lost, he also did the first Cloverfield, and I remember leaving the theater after the first Cloverfield, and everybody had so many questions. Where did this thing come from? Is it an alien?
Yeah, that's all his stuff, though.
Yeah,
right.
Well, that's the thing, is you leave the theater with all these questions, and while I'm disappointed that it didn't tie in better to the original Cloverfield, I kind of think that was the whole purpose. They want you leaving with even more questions. Like,
I guess so.
It answered
Hungry
this.
for more type of thing, right?
Yeah, so it answered where these big demons came from the first movie, but now you have questions about the timeline, and you have questions, okay, well, the first Cloverfield, what dimension was that in, So
it opens it up for books and fan fiction and who knows what, right? So we have mentioned some stuff we already don't like, and I'd like to mention a couple other things that I didn't like about the flick. I don't know how long you said you liked it, but I have a couple of dislikes. The one thing that I have a rough time with, and surprisingly, because I'm a big, well, we're both big Evil Dead fans, big Ash versus Evil Dead, and I honestly think nothing mixes horror and comedy better than Bruce Campbell and that whole run, right? And this, almost like what you'd mentioned before, dude the ship eats his arm, and then his arm,
Yeah.
a la Ash losing his
Yeah.
hand, let's say, it comes back and it's kind of like alien arm that's got its own mind, right? But dude is like, oh, there's my arm, you know, and it was kind of a funny-ish, but just one of those things where it didn't fit.
They tried. I found, you know what it reminded me of?
Yeah.
Kind of going back to that first Cloverfield, HUD.
Yeah.
The guy that was actually videotaping all of the first Cloverfield movie.
Yeah.
He was kind of the comedic relief, you know, all this stuff is going down and he's throwing lame jokes out or doing weird things. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I think it kind of tied in, where they needed that one comedic guy to do things.
Yeah.
They never did explain what was going on with that ship, why it ate his arm, and it was only hungry for him.
They didn't, because
the
ship
caught
was
him later in the oxygen room too.
With that weird putty stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's a big gripe I had, was the fact that I don't mind mixing different types of movie, comedy and horror. I honestly love it. But if you don't do either one particularly well, you know what I mean?
They both fail.
They just can't. Yeah, they kind of, two negatives don't make a positive type of thing, right?
See, to me that wasn't as much of an issue, because I think there was too much weirdness for me to take it as a serious horror movie.
I guess.
Like the eyeball and him exploding with worms all over and the arm thing. When I saw that, I was like, hey, this is not to be taken seriously.
Right, but there are some really deep, serious kind of dramatic moments with the girl missing her kids, like the main captain but so that you never see Ash on Evil Dead or Ash you never see him have these truly deep moments where tears are streaming down his face and there's violin music playing not violent music, violin music playing in the background. You know what I mean? So it's just meshing so many weird genres. So another thing that bothered me, although I should have known better, is I found right from the get-go, and I'm not a real big details person, but I like to know what the hell's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I found right off the bat, I'm like, I have no idea what they're trying to do. Like I say, I think they were doing
particle
science.
acceleration.
No, I'm just a
heard
simple
of a hard-on
programmer.
collider in France, or the hadron, not the hard-on collider?
That's something different.
Freudian slip.
That's something different.
But that's the thing in France right now, where they accelerate particles and collide them to.
Okay, we're gonna move on from that. So science. All right, and
hard-on science.
Yeah. So the big thing, and we've already talked about it ad nauseum, is just I was disappointed by the really thin tie-in to the other movies.
Mm-hmm.
I just found, and we won't delve into that. I just found that was a real big negative for me, because why call it that and not have a little more substance to it as all?
They had. I'm happy they had more tie-in than 10 Cloverfield Lane, though.
Yeah.
Like, at least they had concrete tie-ins where you can't. Because I left 10 Cloverfield Lane legit thinking, is this just a coincidence that there's Cloverfield in the title? But this one, when you actually see at the end the monster, it's the same monster.
This is true.
So at least you know, okay, this is the same movie or the same branch of movies. So I was happy with some of those concrete tie-ins.
I'll grant you that.
Yeah.
I mentioned the Super Bowl ad earlier, and I meant to mention this, is that didn't it seem weird to you that they just threw it out there and said they were releasing it pretty much at midnight or right after Super Bowl? No hype, no word, no build-up or anything like that. There's a lot of speculation that it was because they kind of knew it wouldn't do very well, so that's why they didn't bother putting it out into the theaters as far as before Netflix picked it up and everything like that. And
isn't it a Netflix original?
I think the rights, though, prior to that.
I thought Netflix just created it.
I think Netflix may have actually made it a Cloverfield thing, but I think the rights of just this movie in general, without the Cloverfield tie-in, was before Netflix.
Now.
And the theory was that they just threw it on there because they were like, yeah, we better just throw this out there and let the name and a Super Bowl ad pretty much carry it.
But see, I don't agree with that, because do you remember the hype for the Cloverfield movie?
Yeah, there was a lot, wasn't there?
No. There was pretty much the trailers were just a couple of clips from that hand camera.
But there were trailers.
But you had no idea what it was about.
Yeah.
You just kind of saw this and you're like, oh, what's going on?
Yeah, fair enough. But this was just a boom. There you go, Cloverfield Paradox. Oh well. We'll agree to disagree on this one.
No, I'm gonna convince
before
you to
I
agree
whap you
with
with a
me.
microphone. So, just as far as a couple other things I'd like to mention before we start summarizing this and getting to the end, the girl that was found in the wall,
Mm-hmm.
you knew that she had some alternate kind of MO. She was nice to begin with.
She was evil looking as hell.
She was evil looking, yeah. She's kind of one of those ones where they can act all sweet and nice, but
she reminded me of like Tilda Swinton, that pale kind of I'm not sure where you stand and I don't trust you.
You got something against pale people? I'm pretty pasty, man.
I'm paler than you,
and
you shouldn't trust me because I don't trust you.
So here's what I didn't get about that. Okay, so I assume that the way they were talking, her world was the one that the main Captain Chickie wanted to get to, right?
Yes.
That where her family was alive on Earth. So why was the let's call her evil girl
Mina?
Is that her name?
Mina.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, she's mean. How did they not know she's mean?
Exactly.
So Mina, I'll call her that. I'm going with you on this one. I'm not sure, but Mina, why was she trying to sabotage
Hamilton?
Just everything? Because you'd think if they were trying to get back to their own dimensions, wouldn't she want to get to her own dimension where things were not Cloverfield monster-ish?
Well, that's her. Mina's dimension is the one that they're in right now.
Yeah, the good one.
Yeah, but do you remember when they see the news feed for her dimension?
Oh.
When they clicked on the Hard-On Collider in space.
Yeah.
The whole station blew up and it crashed. Remember? Because they're saying, the Cloverfield Paradox had crashed in the ocean.
Oh, that's right.
So they're all standing there going, so the mission failed and everybody's dead.
Oh, so she died on it.
So she was saying,
alive,
hey, this one works. I want to
Gotcha.
take this ship back to my world and save my world because this one actually works. You know?
Okay, so it's not just the science part I didn't understand. I didn't understand that part either. So, do you have anything else you wanted to say about this particular movie?
One of the things that I loved, and it's just a little scene that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But Tam, her death scene, I thought that was great.
Tam.
The Asian girl when she's in the airlock and it fills up with water and as soon as it
yeah.
cracks it just freezes completely. I thought that was
pretty
great.
good, eh?
I was like, I love this scene. I have to, remember to mention that.
And once again, one of those things where they did space well.
Yeah, because
right?
and the way they killed Mina is, cliche space death where there's a cracked window, you get sucked out into the void and you die. That's exactly what I thought was going to happen to Tam. Oh, okay, I see the door kind of crashing open. She's going to get sucked out and whatever. But as soon as everything froze, I'm like, yes, this is awesome.
Yeah, that's true. Good call. So on a scale of 5, what would you rate this one?
I'm going to say 3.8 wormy eyeballs out of 5.
Nice. I didn't like it as much as you, so this kind of makes sense. I'm going to give it 2.5 wall-eaten severed arms out of 5. So that concludes our podcast for Cloverfield Paradox. But I encourage you to start following us. We're actually on Facebook. We're on Twitter now. And, we really welcome your comments, your feedback, because we're just trying to make this better for you guys is what it comes down to. So you can find us at any of those places. We're Geek Philosophers with an F. PH Philosophers was already taken by a blogger, so props to him. Before we sign off, though, I'd also like to throw a little shout out to Stephen and Daniel from their own podcast called The Audacity to Podcast. They've given us some really good tips and some tricks on how to get our podcast more searchable and everything like that. And we really throw it out to those guys. So make sure you look at their podcast and listen to them as well. Till next time, we're the Geek Philosophers, and talk to you later.